Hi everyone, I'm Colette and welcome to Witch Ways. I want to talk to you today about house spirits, a little bit about their origins, the types that there are, how to know if they're beneficial, neutral, or in fact harmful, and how to work or coexist with them and what they might like. Originally, house spirits were often the local land spirits or the spirit of a place where the house was built or the spirit of the trees that were felled to make the house. Then an offering would be given as a purchase price or a way to become on friendly terms with the local spirit. Often that offering was a sacrifice or an animal or something else that was valuable to protect against repercussions. And often that spirit then would become a kind of guardian of the family and the dwelling. It just sort of extended its stewardship to the new occupants as they lived there. Over time, as outbuildings and fields were developed, as people developed agriculture, spirits specialized to cover those areas and offer protection, stewardship, and friendship of those areas as well. There are hundreds of different names and types of house spirits depending on where you live. However, I generally find it helpful to break them down into a few large categories just to give us somewhere to start and to know how to begin to interact with them. The main categories of house spirits are, of course, the spirit of the physical house itself, deities who are associated with hearth or home, ancestor spirits including ghosts or ancestral helpers, and then the hundreds of specialized spirits of place and local spirits who have some association with the home. In practice, these lines become blurred and have become more blurred over time as different cultures mixed or as Christianity or colonialism tried to stamp these practices out. The first type that I want to go into just a little bit deeper is the physical spirit of the house itself. My experience with that is that it is slow to develop over time as people live in it and it settles into this new thing that appeared in the landscape. One of you asked about new buildings, and of course they have spirits, but I do think it takes some time for them to really settle in. To me, what it feels like is that spirit of place or of the timber sort of embodies itself in the wood framing of the house and then gradually expands and emanates throughout the house over time. My early ancestors, of course, would have made offerings to trees that they used in building their homes, and you can still make offerings to your house spirits and the wood in them today. Offerings to a house spirit look different in different cultures. For me, I like to just kind of touch the frames of the doorways as I pass through them, even if it's just the doorways between rooms, and offer a little burst of appreciation and affection to the house and thank it for sheltering me. I often just give it a little pat on the walls. Some people use house steams as offerings or use blood or spirits on the foundation, on the stones at the corner of the house, on the threshold of the house, pour out offerings on the threshold of the house, or a number of other practices. Sometimes there's a special place in the corner for those kinds of offerings. The second category of house spirits is what we would call house deities or hearth deities. And examples of these would be Hestia in Greece or Vesta in Rome, Frigg in Norse tradition, to some degree Brigid in Celtic countries, and many others in local places. As I mentioned, house deities were often given offerings in a special spot, like a corner, or often it was the hearth or threshold where food or alcohol was given. Often they were made a small shrine where a statue of that deity was placed and candles or other offerings might be given. Today you can use a high shelf in your kitchen to leave offerings, especially if you have cats who are interested in your offerings, or dogs. You can also place a small table or a small shelf somewhere near the center of your house. One of the things that I do is place a small altar right up against sort of the central venting chimney for my furnace. Sometimes house deities were invited to sit down with the family and eat at meals, or if they were given food elsewhere and a piece of it was dropped, that food might be returned to the table and sit on the table for a while before it was offered again to the deity. I want to talk about ancestral spirits next. So one of the ways this happened was if land or a house was passed down through generations. A particular ancestor, often the one who was the first person to build the house, might cross over, but then work with that family from the other side to protect and guard the home and the family. Sometimes it's just a particular ancestor somewhere along your lineage who has an interest in protecting you or your household, and they may show up and offer to do that. And these types of ancestors usually are fed year-round, not just remembered at Samhain. And this seems like a good place to talk about ghosts. So how do you know that you have a ghost in your house? Usually it's because somebody is sensitive to them. So a ghost could be someone that is in your family line, a spirit who is dead who is attracted to that particular spot for some reason, maybe because of the energy of the spot itself, or it could be someone who lived there previously and has passed on. Usually there are signs that people are sensitive to. So that might be feelings of cold or a sensation of seeing them or hearing them. It could be lights flickering. It could be a smell associated with that person in life, like a perfume or an aftershave. It could be a smell of rot or some other kind of smell. Smells are really commonly associated with ghosts. So, of course, most of these things can also be caused by mundane reasons or other types of spirits. The best way is to have someone who is good at talking to spirits check it out and see what's going on, if you aren't good at that yourself. So why do ghosts stick around? It could be because they are afraid of crossing. Maybe they did some bad things in life, or they just had a fear of death and were unresolved or didn't know what was going on. Maybe they didn't have a belief in the afterlife and they felt like when they died, their life just ended. Maybe they left some unfinished business or something they left unsaid. This is often true of people who died suddenly and didn't have a chance to say goodbye to those they loved. Sometimes they become ghosts because they are confused. In general, if they're benign, many people choose to just let them stay. If they're not like waking you up in the night or banging things around or filling you with dread or terror. If you feel that they are staying for a specific purpose like protection, of course you might want to let them stay. However, in general, I kind of feel like unless they have a real reason for being there, it's good for them to cross over and continue their journey. And I do have a video about how to cross over ghosts that I made last year around Samhain, and I will link it in the description or the comments. Some human spirits do actually completely cross over, are at peace, but choose to come back to help their descendants. The fourth category is very large and diverse, and this is miscellaneous spirits that are smaller than deity, and they are the things like the brownies, the hobs, the vater, the nis, the various household spirits that function around a home, a farm, or the land and do specialized tasks. They might help with chores. They might be protectors of the family. They might work in the barns, fields, or even in the sauna, like some of the spirits do in Finland. As for offerings, generally in Celtic countries, milk or milk and honey, or even alcohol is considered an acceptable and pleasing offering. However, some Germanic spirits do not want to be given offerings or specific type of offerings. And this is really confusing to me. I have to say, I am really not an expert on the ins and outs of offerings of Germanic type spirits who may not want offerings. They might leave if you give them to them. So what I tell people to do is usually to look back through your lineage, do some research on the type of helpful spirits that might show up to you in your home or where you live, and then use a pendulum or some other type of divination method to find out what type you have living with you, and then do research on what they like, what that specific spirit likes, or ask them directly with a pendulum. So how do you know if the spirits in your house are okay, and what do you do if they aren't? Often people know if they're not okay. Sooner or later you get a feeling of dread, anxiety, fear, the feeling of being watched by a lurker. Maybe you're seeing shadows in a corner that don't feel right to you or out of the corner of your eye. And of course, all these things could have mundane reasons. If you have a spirit guide that you trust and you have the skill to talk to that trusted spirit guide, or the skill of using a pendulum, you can ask that trusted guide to vouch for this new spirit that is showing up. So what about spirits that move things around? In Germany, these are known as poltergeists, but they also have many other names in other cultures. And these are often fine, but they can be malicious. So it's important to pay attention to how you feel about it and what you're sensing. They are often spirits that want your attention. And if you have the skills, it's important to ask them what it is that they need, or to ask somebody to do that for them. Sometimes they're just trying to get your attention, or they need some assistance or help. Before I do any work at communicating with an unknown spirit, I put up a quick protective circle around myself, and I do have a video on that. And I may actually add some extra layers of protection, like protective oil or a protective spray or jewelry that I've charged with protection before I do any investigation of unknown spirits. What do you do if they actually aren't okay? So the first thing you need to do is clear and banish them. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. If you work with protective spirits, I would invite them to help you. The thing that I usually do is a triple clearing. And for me, that involves clearing the house and cleaning the house very thoroughly, and then going from the center out or from top to bottom or bottom to top using smoke of burning herbs, putting on a steaming pot of clearing and banishing herbs, and spraying the entire house with a protective spray of some kind, and then having pre-made charms or other type of protective bundles of herbs or other types of objects that you put up immediately as soon as you have cleared the space. If this doesn't work and the spirit still is hanging around, you need to get somebody who's more skilled than yourself. A few folks wanted to know about inviting or getting benevolent spirits and moving them into a house with them. So one of the things that you can do is, if you had benevolent spirits that worked with you in your old home, you can invite them to come to your new home when you're moving. I did get a question about whether a car could have a house spirit, and I would say if it was stationary, it could, and it acted as a home. Because one of the things about house spirits is they do tend to get attached to the place and the structure of where they're living. So if you're moving frequently with a vehicle, that might not work. However, you might have a guardian spirit that is perfectly happy to travel with you in your car. I want to thank you all so much for sending me such great questions on this particular topic and being so enthusiastic about it. I would love if you put in the comments if you have ever had house spirits. I'd also appreciate it if you checked out my Patreon page. I do a lot of great content on there. Until next time, stay safe and be well.